Can you please state your name?
Oh, Josh Halpert.
And what's your occupation?
NP.
Where do you work?
Sloan Kettering.
Interesting. I hear on the internet and on many health sites that when you're overweight, it's a bigger risk for cancer. Is that true?
Generally, I don't know the exact numbers, but
Can you explain how this is?
any help? I mean, I would just think in general it leads to. Actually, I don't know.
How does red meat act as a risk for colon cancer?
That's red meat. You mean why?
Yeah.
What part it makes it? It could be the higher fat content.
Yeah, I'm feeling. So you know how on some labels it says this product is known to the state of California to cause cancer? Why is it it's just known to the state of California to cause cancer?
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I'm not into regulations. I assume they're more progressive or liberal, so they have standards that other states don't, like with the emissions on the cars.
All right.
The reason has to do with California's legislature makes it very easy for small groups of citizens to add laws into the country or into the state. So they have small interest groups that press things like total disclosure of all of the chemicals that could possibly be in a given thing.
Okay, thank you. How many DNA correcting genes are there? Like numerous, probably.
I have no idea.
Anybody?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I hear that the genes that correct DNA, they make proteins that go over and try to fix anything in the cell cycle. Do you know what proteins like?
Yeah. No.
Okay, so let me. No.
No. So this guy knows. He knows.
So there are a number of different pathways in cells that are designed to fix the errors in DNA that occur through many different processes, both spontaneous and caused by kind of outside factors that, if left uncorrected, could cause mutations that can lead to diseases like cancer. It's probably a little too open-ended to ask how many proteins there are, and I think it would be very difficult to give an accurate answer for that. There are a number of different pathways towards correcting mutations that function based on the specific type of error that's being corrected. In general, these take advantage when they can of the fact that your DNA is anti-parallel, that you have two different strands of DNA that are opposed to one another that have the same information in them, basically. So that if one of those has an error, the systems in your body can usually use the other one as a template to fix it. Obviously, you could imagine a situation where you have breaks that don't allow you to copy off of the other strand, in which case there are systems that just kind of do the best that they can.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important to underscore is that that there's a tremendous amount of the spontaneous mutation or spontaneous copy error in the process of normal DNA replication that is fixed by the endogenous systems of the body. And that it's actually relatively rare for a permanent mutation to be introduced as the result of a copy error.
So I guess touch base on a couple things. Anderson's X-ray.
Is each cancer specific to a certain proofreading gene?
You don't think so?
Specific to what?
Proofreading gene, like a protein or something created by a gene?
So the answer is yes and no.
Right, yeah.
Cancers, and I think it's more relevant to talk about the specific genes that get mutated, not necessarily how they get mutated. Some cancers are associated with specific sets of genes called oncogenes, which are genes that when mutated in certain ways will cause cells to overgrow and to ignore the signals that the body is sending to tell them to stop growing. By the same token, there are also proteins called tumor suppressors that function in normal cells to stop cells from overgrowing, from replicating too much, from avoiding the signals that the body sends for programmed cell death. And if those tumor suppressors are mutated, then you can imagine that the cell will be more likely to go down those paths and more susceptible to overgrowth, to all of the changes that result in tumor formation.
But they've been there for like 120 days. Right?
If we're speaking about exactly how they get those mutations that predispose them to cancer, there are a smaller number of cancer syndromes that are typified by having errors not just in the genes but in the proofreading genes, such that you have a decreased ability to proofread, so you cause more errors resulting in more mutations, some of which are in genes that predispose to cancer. I think, since we're talking about colon cancer, I think the type you may be thinking of is a syndrome called hereditary non-polyposis colon carcinoma, or HNPCC, which is an error in a type of DNA repair pathway called the nucleotide excision repair pathway, which is again a biochemical mechanism to solve a certain kind of DNA damage. And there are families who have errors in this nucleotide excision repair pathway, and because of that, their cells are more likely to accrue mutations, and the specific mutations that they accrue make them more likely, through reasons that we don't completely understand but are being investigated, to result in this specific kind of colon cancer.
He's getting thoracic appointment.
So I have a question. Can you tell me more about this pathway?
Dr. Yoon only sees patients on Fridays.
I haven't thought about it in years, I'm afraid. So, I think it would probably be getting a little too much into the weeds to talk about specifically how it works. But it's basically a pathway of fixing single nucleotide defects in DNA replication. But again, the mechanism by which having errors in that repair pathway leads to cancer, it's a long road, and it's really pretty narrow specialist knowledge to understand kind of how that works, and it's not my field. But so the general thematic path is you have a family who has an error in a DNA proofreading gene. So in general, their cells are more susceptible to not correcting properly the spontaneous errors that happen every day in cells. And so they are more susceptible to having to developing mutations in their genome, and the specific kinds of mutations that they are predisposed towards generating are, for whatever reason, tends to cause this kind of cancer. It tends to happen more in this location, which is the right side of the colon, and results in these kinds of this right-sided colon cancers.
I was going to ask, I looked up and there were a bunch of genes that help with this repairing and overlooking of problems, but my question is that there's a syndrome or an illness I looked up, and it's when the MLH1 or MSH2 gene gets destroyed or damaged. I'm wondering, is there anything that backs it up? Are these genes not protected by anything?
So, I think there is a certain amount of again, spontaneous damage that happens to cells and that happens to the DNA of cells. And the more, and there are defense mechanisms against that, but no gene is completely 100% immune from DNA damage. And specifically, no gene is immune from DNA damage that causes a durable mutation to be introduced into the genome. I think one of the reasons that this happens and that these become familial syndromes is that this is a gene that you can live without, at least in the short term. You are still viable as an organism with a deleted DNA repair gene. The problem is that you start accruing mutations that many years down the line lead to the development of cancer. And that means that when you have this syndrome, you can pass that syndrome to your children and from them to their children. So you can have this hereditary cancer syndrome because the symptoms and the cancers themselves take so many years to manifest that it doesn't significantly impact your fertility or your ability to have children. So you can still have, so that this can be passed from generation to generation.